Okay, so in this week's Q&A, I've got a question submitted by Peter Scott, who has asked in the YouTube comments, what's your internet speed like? I like to do Betfair trading and use Geeksoy, however, my broadband's a bit crap and I don't get fibre in my area. So thanks for submitting the question there, Peter. It's one that comes up not very often at all anymore, if I'm quite honest, and that's purely because the way technology's gone, things have advanced, and fast broadband is typically available everywhere now, maybe not for you. So to get straight to the point, what's my broadband speed like? I have no idea, I've had no reason to check it. I believe it's 100 meg here at the offices. Obviously having offices separate from home, it is a big plus. Obviously I chose an office with super fast broadband as well. I found that having offices at home was an issue trading full time because it sort of overlaps with personal life, family. People don't quite get the boundaries sometimes and it can become a little bit frustrating. Plus it's hard to switch off from work sometimes when it's, it's co-located at home. So that was a choice I made. Fortunately I have super fast broadband here at the offices because of that. So to get round to sort of what I think you're asking there, what do you actually need? I would suggest that you really want to have sort of like download speed of about 3 meg. You probably can get by on a bit less, depending on what you're doing. You want the information to be streaming and live. You don't want things to be glitching and you don't want lockups. Now that's the main issue that comes straight into my mind when I read that question, because a lot of the time it's reliability. Reliability is the big one. You don't want things locking up and stopping or having to try and hedge up positions elsewhere purely because you got a bit of a rubbish broadband connection. So if I think back to a previous life, when I very first got involved in Betfair trading, I was in the military. I lived in a little village on top of a hill in the middle of nowhere, just outside Bath, called Caan. And as nice as it was, the internet speed there was absolutely atrocious. And I remember, I think I used to get about 1.2 or 1.5 meg there at the time. I'm sure it's a lot faster now. And you certainly don't necessarily need fibre, especially if you only want to get 3 meg. But that was a problem for me back then. But it wasn't even really the speed as such. It was more a case of things used to lock up, problems used to happen, it wasn't reliable, and you don't want to be overexposed with a position in the market. And basically it's one of these problems that you can overcome. So reliability is the big one. And I would also say make sure that you've got a backup of some kind, particularly if you've got slow or poor quality internet. There's a separate video on that, I believe, on YouTube, so we'll put that up in the corner somewhere. And the only other thing that I can add to this is which service provider do you use, because although you may have the same line and the same connection and the same capability of the line, depending on the company that you go with, you'll get a different level of customer service, and sometimes it's the difference because it means you've got a problem, you might have a persisting problem, and I've had this in the past myself when I used to have connections at home and trade from home a lot, and that was that if you talk to some of the mainstream broad providers, you're more likely to get a call centre in another country, the other side of the planet, where they're reading off a flowchart and they don't actually know what your problem is, they don't understand the problem. Whereas if you go with a more expensive, smaller, more niche company, Zen, I believe, was a very reliable one that I actually would recommend and rate myself. It will cost a lot more money, but when you ring them up, you actually get to talk to a specialist, which is looking at the specifics of your line, what's happening, and they actually know what they're talking about. So I would pay that extra money if you're serious about trading and you don't want to have internet issues. Aside from that, mate, if you're stuck in the middle of nowhere and you've got a really poor quality connection and you're stuck on a 56k modem, if they even exist still, or something like that, then you probably just want to chin it off, because at the end of the day it's reality. You can't trade against other people which are using broadband if your connection's really that bad and that slow, although I think it's probably quite unlikely. On the other end of the spectrum, depending on what you're doing, it may affect you a little bit more. If you're swing trading, if you're scalping, if you're somebody, which I don't think you probably will be, somebody that's sort of like super high frequency trading where milliseconds really matter, then that could be a problem too. But those people are few and far between anyway. So hopefully that answers your question thoroughly there, Peter. Thanks for submitting it, and I look forward to seeing you in the comments again.